Welcome back. We have talked a lot about returning to the workplace in terms of the pandemic. Today, though, we're going to talk about going back to work after taking time off to raise a family. So for anyone watching who's looking to get back into the game but isn't sure where to start, you were in the right place. Career coach Sarah Vermunt is here to help us. She always has the best information. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Tracy. I'm really happy to talk about this today.
Well, we're happy you're here to chat about this with us. It must be sort of really hard for a full-time parent to come back to a job. You know, you've been home, you've been doing your thing. They've had more than just a mat leave, right? They've been raising their children for years. So what do you need to start thinking about if you're in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, going back into the job market after a multi-year absence is certainly much harder than like a job switch, right? So, you have that big resume gap to think about, which we'll definitely talk about today. You also might encounter bias, right? One of the first questions you might want to ask yourself is, where do I want to enter the job market again? So that's the first thing to ask. You might want to enter the same field that you were in before, right? That's actually the easiest because then all you have to do is address the resume gap. But that's not for everybody. Like, you might be wanting to move into a different field. In fact, I have a lot of clients who actually hated the field that they were working in before. They were doing years of parenting, and so they have tons of anxiety about going back to that. So they're considering a career change. And then there's also the option of working for yourself, right? When you have that multi-year absence while you're raising children, unfortunately, your expectations for pay tend to go down by like 20, 30%, not in every case, but across the board, that's the average. So suddenly working for yourself can actually be a bit attractive because then you don't have to deal with that bias.
That's pretty significant, 20 or 30% downwards from what you're used to. So let's talk priorities. You probably have got to figure out what your priorities are going to be as you head back into the labor force.
Yeah. And your priorities as a parent might be different than they were before you were a parent, right? You might be wanting to enter the job market full time again, or you might want part-time work, or flexible hours might suddenly matter to you much more than they used to, or location might really matter to you now. So that's important. You also want to ask yourself in terms of priorities, like, what intensity of work do I want to be doing? Like, do I want to get on that like career ladder again, where I have a really challenging job, where I'm striving and going after promotions? Or do I maybe want something that's a little less challenging, a little less stressful?
Okay, so we got to deal with it. The dreaded resume. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to deal with mine. It's been too long. But you've got to deal with there's been gaps. So what do you start to do when you're starting to zhuzh up that resume?
Yeah, there's nothing harder than having to redo the resume as a parent who's been parenting for a while. So first thing I'll say is, don't get too cute when trying to craft a job description for yourself as a parent. I've seen things like chief home officer, and it's cute, but it doesn't land super well professionally. So just say something like primary caretaker or primary caregiver and list a couple of transferable skills. You want to keep that section short. Also, if you don't want, like, let's say you've been parenting for like 10 or 12 years and you haven't just been off for 5. If you don't want like a chronological resume where there's a really big gap from all those years, you do have the option of trying something called a functional resume or a skills-based resume, where there's less focus on listing your jobs in chronological order and more focus on sections of different types of skills and experience, with just a little bit at the bottom of your employer listings. I will say, however, that type of resume is not most employers' favorite, so it is a bit risky, but there's tons and tons of templates for those for free on the internet. And then lastly, I would say about the resume, don't focus too heavily on highlighting the transferable skills of your parenting. Like, don't make that section too long, because honestly, employers tend to give it less weight. They don't take it as seriously. So you want to keep that bit short and sweet if you have it on your resume, and you want to focus on mostly your previous work experience.
Interesting, because I would think those skills would be highly sought after. If you're running a home, it's a lot harder, in my opinion, than going to an office. But That's good that we know this from the perspective of the employer, like keep that stuff short. You also have advice for how you might get your foot in the door if you're heading back into the workforce. What is that advice?
Yeah. So, and to answer the point you just made, like those skills are actually really valuable. But for some reason, employers, when they're framed under parenting,
Uh-huh.
they just tend to give it less weight. So there are a few things you have to do to get your foot in the door to increase your chances when you're going up against that bias, right? One thing is, if you're thinking about returning to work and you have a bit of time before you want to like get in full time, I would really encourage people to consider maybe taking on like a freelance project, a short contract, just so that it's almost like a toe dip back into the work world first if you have the opportunity. The other nice thing about that is it gets something more recent on your resume, and then it's less of a jump in terms of employers considering you as a professional again because you're already in the game. Also, use your connections. I mean, the people who truly see your value are the people who know you the best. So make sure you're letting people know you're looking for work. Let them know specifically what they're looking after, what you're looking for, so that they can be in your corner. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is great news, the job market is actually pretty hot right now. Job seekers have the upper hand, which I got to say never happens. So we're at a great moment in the work world. And so that means employers are a little more open minded about who they might take on for their next hire.
That is very good news. Take advantage of that. Thanks, Sarah. Lots of great information. I'm sure many of our viewers will appreciate.